town, no. One day you go run this town, no. Amen, amen. You self go spray me, baby, go call you a me.
Okay, so it's time to talk about the leadership gap for your sons.
Just before you talk about the leadership gap, a reaction came in just now about what we were talking about in the opening. I had a worse experience, this viewer says. My old Mercedes-Benz, which was sold as scrap a long time ago, got booked for a traffic offense a few days ago. I got a reminder yesterday saying because of the festive season and to help Lagos grow, I should please go and pay for the so-called traffic offense. Otherwise, my vehicle would be impounded. Let them go and retrieve the carcass of the car from the junkyard.
Oh, God. You know what this sounds like? There is a need to revamp the entire system.
The one that is in the junkyard gets a reminder and gets a ticket. This person whose car is still on the road, who has been booked, doesn't get a reminder and doesn't get a notice that they've been booked.
Second piece.
Wrap your head around that.
I know I can't. I won't even try. Now, the end of the year is usually a time to reappraise, take stock, pause, look back at our achievements, and identify mistakes, plan for the future. Now, we've got some things to cheer about as Nigerians in spite of our multitude of problems. Isn't an exaggeration. So consider we are one of Africa's largest economy. Right now, we are the best practice example of an African election and occupying many known leadership positions in the international arena. Mention African Union, ECOWAS, AFDB, and the rest of them. So, although these are all something to be proud of, these achievements are beclouded by the prevailing challenges of poverty, hunger, unemployment, corruption, lack of infrastructure, and terrorism. Well, put that in the insecurity docket. So, what does this tell us? It tells us that we all know what the problem is, that Nigeria has for long been plagued by the lack of the right leadership, and at various levels, I dare say. So let's have a conversation around this with two gentlemen at this moment joining us. Dr. Joseph Ochongu is the Director General and CEO, Institute for Peace and Conflict Resolution in the Ministry of Foreign Affairs. He joins us from our Abuja studio. Good morning and thank you for joining us, Dr. Ochongu.
Good morning. Please, delighted to be present in the studio, Channel Studio this morning.
All right. And we also have Dr. Toye Shobande, who is a strategic leadership consultant, join us virtually. Thank you for joining us this morning, Doctor.
Thank you. Good morning. Thank you for the opportunity to be here.
Yeah. So let's begin with you in our Abuja studio, Dr. Ochongu. Dr. Ochongu, you know, the challenge, one of the major issues a number of people have pointed to as beclouding our progress is that of insecurity. And insecurity is usually local, as some people would say, and it's usually a function of one misunderstanding, misrepresentation, or the other. Now, it would be expected that political leadership and whatever else is there would have helped us to navigate all of these. How would you say that we have fared in that regard in the year 2023?
I think the year 2023 was a significant timeline, for Nigeria in terms of transition politics. It's a year where we, once again, successfully were able to transit, in terms of our political leadership in Nigeria, which is very, very key. If you look at issues around peace, security, development, and governance, the first and foremost is to do leadership transition. That is the transfer of leadership from one particular political party to another, or within one person to another. It is very central in democratic practice. So I think the year 2023 was a year that was filled with a lot of back and forth actions, dynamics, complexities, controversies. But at the end, we still had a very successful election, that has produced once again the All Progressive Congress under the leadership of President Bola Ahmed Tinubu. And that is where we are, and then we have the party mandate, which is the Renewed Hope agenda, with 8 priority areas that have been put in place. I think that I'm just going to be a bit frank, as a Nigerian in this place. And I've had the privilege, of working very closely with 2 former presidents, working directly in the office of the Chief of Staff to the President. I'd worked with President Goodluck Jonathan. I'd worked with the former president briefly before I left in 2016 and then DFID as conflict advisor. I think that all these men are great men. I mean, you should look closely for them. Men with human face and all that. But again, if you look at the wider society in terms of the complex nature, the configuration of our society and how leadership recruitment has been, over the years, I think that is where the major problem is. But I'm very optimistic, with the present government in terms of with the president coming to power, doing some of the first smart decisions in terms of the quick reconciliatory moves, the dialogue, and the negotiations back and forth, that he put in place in his first 1 month once he came into power. I think that to me, is a very promising component of it. What we need to do now is to ensure that we have the right leadership recruitment, across all the sectors, and then to ensure that in all the respective ministries, departments, and agencies, we are able to bring the intellectual wing, men and women, who are outstanding in their respective fields, to lead some of these ministries, departments, and agencies, as well as the private sector.
Yeah. Dr. Chogu, which is where the challenge really is. But let me take Dr. Shobande's opening comments on this. We have a multi-level leadership system in our democracy. The powers of the president are different from the powers of the governor, different from the powers of the local government chairman, even though a number of people will put a lot of question mark on that. They're also different from the powers of the legislature in the bicameral House of Representatives and Senate, and the Houses of Assembly in the various states. So they have checks and balances and all those things. Do you see that structure as being a challenge to our governance structure or leadership structure, or it is something that is actually complementary, Dr. Shobande? But I'm sure we'll get him back. So, well, Dr. Chogu, I wanted to take you up on that. Okay. But Dr. Shobande, I understand you are there. I hope you got the question.
No, I didn't get the question. I was out and I tried to come back in.
Okay. Yes. All right. The question is, we have a multi-level leadership structure in our democracy in Nigeria. The president, governors, the legislature, Senate, House of Reps, and so they have checks and balances among themselves. But the challenge here now, which is what I would like you to speak to, is whether that is a challenge. The issue is whether it's a challenge or it is something that's supposed to work for us. Because a number of people will be wondering, how come we have all of these eggheads, so to speak, that are supposed to do one thing or the other, but then we still have this challenge of leadership gap that is not producing for the people as one would expect?
Yeah, in principle and in theory, we have the checks and balances in place. But what checks and balances ought to do is to help weigh into the power dynamics, where each arm of government does what is prescribed for it under the Constitution, and where there are violations or there are excesses in the performance of one arm of the government or the other, they are not necessarily seen to be adversarial, but complement each other's role. in nations development, in the nation's development. But a friend of mine put it succinctly when I was discussing with him why we have it this way, that it is seemingly not working, is because there's a power chasm in our leadership structure. There's a power chasm. The word chasm there talks about a gap. There's a gap. There is a difference in the vision and in the purposes for governance. And that power chasm is reflecting in every aspect of our lives. For example, the average Nigerian cannot guarantee access to justice. And the judiciary is an important arm of government. And our inability to access justice also erodes our trust in whatever the government is doing. So the inability of the average man on the street accessing justice real time negates those checks and balances that we are talking about. It negates it completely. Now, checks and balances is not meant to be that one arm of government is against another arm of government. It's not that the legislature will now be excessively against the executive, or the judiciary will be against. No, that's not what checks and balances is. To be able to curtail the potentials of excesses of certain variants that may occur in the discharge of their duties. And is to help redirect and rechannel the focus of each aspect of government to the fulfillment of the constitutional roles and the objectives that are supposed to play. But as a result of this power chasm that I described earlier, that's why we now have a non-functional system that everything seems to be on the executive alone. The focus is on the executive. And as long as the focus remains on the executive, we do not see the roles or the constitutional provision rules that have been provided for the other parts to do. For example, we've seen some of our lawmakers in the course of their campaign, tell us what they want to do when they get to office. And you cannot differentiate what they are describing to you different from what the governor is also campaigning for. I've been at a meeting where somebody was pitching to us and we had to help develop a strategy for her senatorial aspirations. And at that meeting, as she was describing her aspirations of what she wants to do as a senator, a lot of people started opening the constitution for her and reading it out to her, that this role, this job, this thing that you are describing that you want to do here is not on the exclusive list of the federal government. Somebody brought that up. Another person said, this seems to be the role of the governor of your state, not your job if you become a senator. So that also creates the ineffectiveness, because how many people go into some of these roles to understand what the function is, particularly within the legislative arm? What access does the people have to their legislative representatives in their local constituencies? How many people know the office or know the campaign manifesto of those who are representing them in their various constituencies? Also, again, you remember that the local governments have been rendered moribund completely, so that development has not been localized. Everything has been centralized either at the level of the state or at the federal structure, such that no matter what either any of the governors or the presidency is doing towards development, people cannot feel it at the lowest level. Let me give you an example. There was an executive pronouncement during this Christmas break, about 50% in the cost of transportation for people going on holiday. And we understand that the Railway Corporation even went forward to declare that the price for those who are going to be going with the trains will be completely free. Now, Nigerians were excited about that. Come to implementation, they were about to buy the tickets online and there were no tickets available. There were no tickets available for people to be able to buy. But however, there were tickets available by quote and unquote the railway officials selling it under the black market scope. The process for even buying the ticket online. So policy initiative is not our problem. Developmental initiative is not our problem. When you trace it down from the top to the last person on the street, that is where the power chasm exists. I don't know whether I'm able to answer your questions clearly and convincingly.
Fact.
Okay. We've since been joined by Mrs. Juliet Binichi, who is a Director for Programs and Senior Facilitator at the Institute for National Transformation. Good morning and Merry Christmas to you.
Merry Christmas, compliment of the season.
Yes. I don't know how much of what Dr. Shobande said that you heard when you came in, but I'd just like to pick on the part about the checks and balances. How well do you think these checks and balances are working when we hear when a government leaves office, for instance, he has gone with all the vehicles that were given to him, he has raided the treasury and gone away with all the state money? I mean, is that checks and balances working as far as you're concerned?
You know, one of the things about leadership and nationalism is that we are not there yet. A nation, for me, was fundamentally destroyed by 1975. We started going down the road, especially where a lot of people were retired who were civilians because of a coup. You know, there was a difference between the fact that there was military coup during the Gowon era, and you had civilians who were real civilians working in the civil service. Nigerian civil service was the creme de la creme of West Africa. We taught West Africa what civil service was all about, and we began to develop leadership to the point that we were giving leaders to nations and lending them, and we're paying salaries of teachers in Trinidad and Tobago. And so when the people were retired, my father was part of those kind of people. They were retired
all that
with
knowledge.
Nothing. The knowledge base they had was not transferred. The character of the 1960 men into the 70s was not passed down. A nation is built on character, not policies. Policy itself can only be functional where character exists. We have lost the character of a nation. I don't care what policy you make now. If we do not go back to national orientation, the nerve for this country to get back to where she is has nothing to do with whether the dollar is tumbling, the petrol is up, something is down. The character of a people will determine how far they go. A great man once said, he said, a nation is not known by their natural resources, but they are known by the wealth of their values. At what point in time does a man know that the seat I have is not my personal property? And therefore, everything I'm giving within them, I mean, what's her name, Mrs. Michelle Obama was talking about the fact that even in the White House, how they had to take care of their own needs. And there are things that when you leave the White House, you dare not take. President Trump now is in a dilemma like many other presidents because they are putting torchlight on him. Many other, probably, they put the torchlight, probably took a file or two that they said they are not supposed to have taken. Files, though. We are talking about the entire gamut of your office. You grabbed it and took it away. It just shows that you don't love your country. Nationalism, the measure of nationalism determines prosperity. When our men and women were nationalists in the 60s and 70s, I remember when we were paying the salaries of teachers, it was in cash. Not a dollar was taken. These men lived with their means and invested what they had. So what went wrong? The civil service, which is the nerve of any nation in the world, is not a matter of Nigerian issue. It's a general issue across the world. Needs to get back. We need to retrain our people. Lin Kuan Yew said that we needed to retrain, re-educate, reform. He even added we needed to remove a third world mindset from our people to get them to understand. And when you have an elite class with so much education and no value, no character, you can't build a nation. Nigerians are well educated to a certain degree. Of course, the literacy level is still high comparatively, but if you call the number of Nigerians...
High or low?
Illiteracy is high.
Oh, illiteracy, yes.
Yes, illiteracy is still high.
Yes.
But in comparatively, because we have a population, if you gather all the educated people and abroad, we're still better than many nations, but within our own demographics, we're still low. And so what are we doing? You went to school, you got an education, but you have no values. A nation can never become great by the number of policy documents. It is the character of leaders, whether at a judiciary level, presidential, local level. Why is the Constitution, even with the Constitution we have of 1999, there are basic things that if we concentrate on, we can move this nation a little bit forward while we advance in changing that Constitution, because it does not represent us very well. So it's not so much of the Constitution, it's the character of the people, of leadership.
And where does that, where do we get that from? Because governance is one thing. Society, governance is a product of the society.
Definitely.
And the people who are going to be in government
came from the society.
Mm-hmm. So at what point would you say we lost that one? Because yes, the people that did what you said, you're talking about in 1975, they came from the same society.
Yes, but that society had something that we have also lost. Number one, that society had family values. In those days, if you remember, I remember, you dare not come home with things that are not yours.
Oh, you can. You just have to take it back.
I mean, you know what will happen. Number one, there was family values. And the family values understood that even if we were poor, we had an opportunity to fight for something. But when you now destroy, like he said, the justice system, you destroy equity, you do nepotism beyond reasonable doubt. Family value begins to shift. Certain families say, this your nonsense that you've been doing is not paying. This is how they are doing it now. Then the next one is the religious sector. Whether Islam, whether it's Christians, have also lost their values. United Arab Emirates, prosperity, is a Muslim nation. Malaysia is a Muslim nation. Then we talk about the West, its foundation in Christianity. They have even the value of understanding that in office, you dare not do certain things. But we have been preaching to people to get prosperity without character. Then the education system. Because there are three levels where everybody is formed. You're formed in the family, you're formed by your religion that develops your philosophy through your theology, and your policies all come from that. Then finally, education is ground zero. What is education teaching? The teacher in the classroom is playing partiality between two children. The issue of cheating an exam has escalated. Because getting an A without knowing why you got it, how you got it, is more celebrated than the process.
Okay. Well,
so we need to revamp that foundation to get to the dimension we want. And until we do that quickly, because all nations did it, if we do that quickly, the empirical impact will begin to happen with speed.
Dr. Chogu, I'm sure you have a thing or two to say to some of the things that you have heard. You began by talking about the various ministries, departments, and agencies of government. Many of them are not elected. In fact, at the federal level, we only elect the president and the vice president, and then the members of the National Assembly, who do not work with the ministries, departments, and agencies, but they have to report to them one way or the other. Now, we do not we don't vote for the people in the ministries, departments, and agencies. But the people who work in those places have to report to the one or two persons that we voted for, which are the president and the vice president. But they have cultures that predate the coming to power of the president and the vice president, and predate the coming into power of the governor and deputy governor at the various states. How do we line these things up in a way that it will produce leadership, coherent leadership for progress and development for the people?
Yeah, I think that the way government work is very clear. I think Julie Benite just talked about the civil service. The civil service is the engine room of any government, either at the federal, state, or local level. So it therefore means that you need men and women, with the relevant skill sets and capacities, to be able to drive government policies. The politicians come with their manifestos. They come with their programs and agendas, that fits into the constitution, of the country. And then it is the responsibility, of the technocrats in the respective agencies, ministries, departments, of government with their respective mandates, to be able to drive those programs and actions, of the political party in power, into fruition. And I think that this is where it becomes very imperative, for things to be done newly. And I'm happy, like I'm speaking to you now, that there is a benchmark, for at the federal level, not at the state level now. There is a presidential benchmark, there is a monitoring and evaluation team, a service delivery unit, of the federal government to ensure, that agencies, departments, and ministries of the federal government of Nigeria are able to deliver, on the programs and actions, of Mr. President. And if you look at that, the difference here is that there is a monitoring system to check how these agencies are going to perform from time to time. In my own ministry, that is I'm under the Ministry of Foreign Affairs. There is going to be a monthly report, to the Honorable Minister, of Foreign Affairs, on what my Institute for Peace and Conflict Resolution is doing part-time every month. And he's going to report that template to the Secretary to Government of the Federation and then move on to Mr. President. So I think that these are new developments, that will activate, every ministry, department, and agencies to perform. And don't forget too that Mr. President have given a very clear directive in terms of delivery. It's either you are delivering or you are out. So I mean that it's a public office, and a public office holder has to be altruistic, has to be committed, has to be dedicated, to deliver on the mandate.
That's the expectation, Dr. Ochogu.
Anything outside that, it's completely off it.
That's the expectation. So one of the issues, my apologies, just a second. One of the issues that we have battled, even from the previous government, is that of collaboration. The former president, I remember, 3 different times called security agencies together and said, you guys should collaborate. The same president, said, I think it was in 2018 or 2019, that Nigeria can pull 100 million people out of poverty over the next 10 years in collaboration with states. Now, you have talked about what the federal government is doing. Perhaps the challenge here is coherence and collaboration. Coherence of policies, of what Madam calls character, that people will see and say, okay, we have a direction. The president and the state governors, they are in cahoots. So what are we missing so that people don't expect too much or much more than the president or the federal government can deliver?
Yeah.
Go ahead, I can hear you.
Okay, great. This is the missing link. The missing link now is how we are able to translate these government programs and activities, down the line, to the state governments. We need the state governors buy in, into what the federal government is doing. And the governors too, they need to free the local governments, to be able to perform. Because as we speak, the local government is the front line of the delivery, of any government programs and activities. And if the local government is missing, which I think we have all agreed, across board, that the local government is not functioning the way we want them to function. So I think that the governors they owe Nigerians the responsibility and their respective states the responsibility to free the local governments and allow the local governments to perform. I think that in a different forum I've said that why Lagos seems to have worked over the years is because perhaps of the local government development areas that was created as at 1999 to 2003, 2007. Otherwise, we would have been hearing almost about similar stories, around those places. And I think, again, you mentioned the issue of collaboration with the military. There is an extent to which the military can do. There is an extent to which the security agencies can do. And don't forget, too, that we have a professional military cadre, in our system with our democracy. We are not operating under a Praetorian guard, that is to say, Praetorian military that can go outside of the law to do certain things. So if you look at the complex nature of the conflicts that we face around the country, they all happen within local governments. They all happen in very large swath of areas that are what they call ungoverned areas, or where people don't stay, where the response capacity, of conventional military security system to reach will obviously take time, like what happened in Plateau and what has been happening over time and all that. So we need to begin to rejig how we deal with our rural sector. Because what we are facing now is what I've termed the ruralization of violence, and the inability of the existing structure, to meet with that level of violence, that we are facing in this country. So we need the local government to be opened up. And once we open up the local government and they are functioning, we'll be able to pinpoint particular areas, within the states, and allow local government to take certain level of actions. Where they cannot take actions, they take it to the state, and where the state cannot take it, they take it to the federal. And that is how these things are going. How I think that 2024 is going to make a whole world of difference. In terms of collaboration, the tri-services are collaborating very well. And I think that even the tri-services are collaborating with the DSS. And I'm saying this, as somebody who is privileged to be in the system and working with the system. And I believe strongly, too, that there are brilliant men, and women in all these services, that can actually bring this thing to an end. And I'm sure that with the political will, that we are seeing, we all have to work together, both civil, military, to be able to nip this whole thing in the bud and bring it to the bud and bring it to an end, and then end this shame. Because whether we like it or not, it's a shame. It's a shame. I've worked in this sector for over 20 years, and I'm completely appalled, that we still have a frequent and recurrent incidences, of these things. But like I said, we need to re-energize ourselves. We need to strengthen our collaborations, but by all means, we need to allow the local government systems to work. If the local government systems do not work, then there is just very little or much that we can achieve, and that's the obvious truth.
Okay.
I've been in the front line of the reform of the local government system and the state sorts of assembly.
Okay.
So we need to actually free these places and allow them to ventilate democratically, so that we can make mileage and achieve what we need to achieve. As a nation and as a people, we cannot continue on this track again. And I think that 2024 should be presenting us this opportunity for us to make a world of difference.
Okay. Dr. Ochogu, but as long as the state assemblies do not want to pass the thing about local governments getting their funds directly, there's really nothing anybody can do, even though we all know that governance really affects the people at that lower level. As long as they don't get their own funds to do what they want for the people, and the state's houses of assembly do not agree to it, they do not domesticate that policy, there's nothing anybody can do. So, Dr. Shabani, let me take you away from civil service and all that. Do you think there's enough mentorship and guidance for future leaders?
It's a very risky question to say yes or no to. And I will say that because you know me, I'm much more aligned with the fact that mentorship is built on sound value systems. And it's like, as if Ms. Benite was here the last time, exactly a year ago, you and I had the same conversation where I alluded to the fact that whatever transformational objectives we want to achieve in our nation in terms of leadership development still rests on the fact that family values comes first. Now, to talk about the possibility of having to mentor new leaders, my challenge is this. Why I said it's a bit risky is because the conceptual framework as to how we define governance has been mutilated for the young people to understand.
Corrupted.
When you sit down on social media and read comments alone, don't tweet, don't post, just read comments alone, you will know how much trouble we have to deal with. The conceptual framework of governance is what we are seeing in the body language of those who are in government today. And that's exactly what people will emulate. There's a proverb in Yoruba language that says, Eshinwaju ni teyin wo sare, meaning the horse that is running in front is the one that the horse at the back runs after, follows, emulates. Is leadership by example. So the question is, like a father figure in the home, the way I talk to my spouse, I'm telling my son how he will talk to his wife when he becomes a man and gets married and have his own wife. It's just as simple as that. If I am very harsh towards my spouse, if I'm very condescending and disrespectful, what I have done is to unconsciously train a young man who will go to school and look down on girls, look down on women, and not respect them. Be harsh, be disrespectful. So mentorship should not only start at the governance level where we want to produce political leaders. Mentorship starts at the home. How am I behaving as a father figure at home? Towards my spouse, towards my children? Am I setting the right examples? When I'm driving on the road, am I yelling at everybody, cursing out on people? I'm teaching the children what to do. One day, our daughter came back from school and she held her phone and, talk, and put off the phone and and the mother and I looked at each other, that, where did you get that from? And I asked her, she asked me, are you the one who was making a phone call and you were? She said, no. I said, no. So we found out that she picked it from school. She picked it from the assistant teacher in school, who will be making phone calls, yelling and shout at people. So we were concerned about the environment. So for us, mentorship is environmental, and it has to be based on sound values. What we have today is that we have education without values that has helped us to successfully produce sophisticated crooks.
That's it.
Sophisticated crooks. Nigerians are the best in the world. We are brilliant. We are smart. We have the education. The education is not the problem. What it has only produced is a sophisticated bigot.
So then there is a problem, if you ask me, Dr. Shobande.
Yes, please.
You said the problem is not the education. So, but because you said this education produces smart people and all of that. And going by what Madam said the other time. Okay, theoretically. So it leads me to the question that Alero asked you earlier about mentorship. If it is supposed to start from the base, and the children, as you have also cited, will not always only be with their parents. If I have a theory that children in school spend more hours in school than from home. Consequently, we have to find a way to be deliberate in the educational structure.
Exactly.
What is missing in that department in terms of mentorship?
What is missing now is that we have parents abdicating the responsibility of parenting to house helps and to teachers and to television and to Facebook, to Instagram, and to TikTok. We have outsourced parental responsibilities to these agencies, particularly social media. You see parents, especially young parents, who say, oh, this child is disturbing me too much. Go and watch TV. Put on TV. Let him watch TV. TV is now parenting the child. So what that stop, you see, our educational curriculum has to change.
Exactly.
To be very honest. If we want to produce a sophisticated Nigerian with the right values that will bring glory and joy to this nation, it is not the responsibility of the politicians. It's like going to war, and at the point of war, you are learning how to shoot, how to target. It's already late. You'll be an easy target for the enemy. So in terms of national development, when I started, we started with civic education in school. I was in primary school when General Babangida visited my school, and they took a whole week to educate us, to enlighten us how to prepare to receive the president. I saw parents come to school to help us pick, to clear everywhere, to make it good. So I had a fair idea growing up, knowing what governance is by virtue of what we learned in class, that when I enter into a public transport, I should stand up for an elder to sit down. But did you see what happened on social media with Professor Wale Soyinka entering into a plane and a young man refused, and people said he was within his right, after all he paid for his flight ticket? That's where the erosion of the values are. So how do you mentor somebody without values? How do you mentor somebody who the parents will not even allow you to impact the values on them. I said, no, don't teach my child. You're not the parents. I didn't, So all of those shows up. And like I said, how many of our messages in our religious institution is transformational towards mentoring people to produce law-abiding citizens? How many of our religious institution has been positioned towards enforcing our national values, taking the values in our national anthem, in our pledge, using it as a sermon on a Sunday and encouraging young people with it instead of sermonizing on their political views?
Okay, Mrs. Beniche, there was something he said which resonated with me. That proverb he gave in Yoruba is the horse in front that you look up to. So, if our young people that we're talking about, who are going to be leaders of tomorrow, are looking at the horses that are ahead, today's leaders, how much do you think they are learning when they hear that we're looking for loans to buy SUVs for our representatives? Governors are leaving government house, carrying government cars with them and emptying the treasury, buying houses in Switzerland with money which we're sure is not what they earned by being governors. So if we're looking at those horses ahead of us, what kind of leaders are we going to be tomorrow? What kind of adults are we going to turn out to be?
You have answered your own question. Anyway.
Oh, okay.
But the reality is this. We had a training for a particular state, I will not mention, and we're training the permanent secretaries and I think the next level 12 or something like that. And I took a class on time management. So I asked everybody in the class to tell me when they resume on the average. What is the official time of resumption? By the federal government law and state government law, they said it. So when do you get to office? And majority of them get to office like 2 hours late, 3 hours late. So I said, okay, let's do some calculations. What is your annual earning? Remove everything. Let's have the basic. 28 days, 22 days, calculate. Then let's go back to the hourly payments and calculate how many hours of financial thievery that you're already doing. And now multiply that by a year. By the time they saw, by a month, by the time they saw, some of them had, because I was walking through the class, I said, okay, your own is 150K. So you are owing us 150K every month when you don't come to work.
On time.
On time. And number two, you are actually stealing. And they said, thou shalt not steal. Those who steal will be judged by the God that all of us in Nigeria we pray, oh God of creation, is on our stanza 2 of our national anthem. And so when you have a people who have not been reorientated or gone through orientation, like you said, one of the things that we need to recognize that family can't do much anymore because family itself needs help. So the people that really have the capacity to help family first is the religious sector and education. Education, I call it ground zero. So no matter what background you come through the door of that school, it is ground zero. Everybody should be equal. I mean, I went to a very good, I paid a premium to put my children in a very good school. And I told the teachers that I'm an old school parent. And I told my children, if your teacher reports you, you're in trouble. Except the teacher is abusing you sexually. But any other thing, you're going to be in trouble. Meaning that you must please your teacher. And I told the teacher, if I catch you paying partiality, I will ensure you're sacked in this school. And they knew me. I kept my word. But the reality is that we got involved in the school system and told the school, put your feet down. If it's 7:45 resumption, you give a 5 minutes leniency, and after that, send that child back home. And it happened. Before we know it, everybody was resuming on time. You see, these things have happened to other nations. We're not the first nations to be going through this comme ci, comme ça leadership of up and down and making ourselves look as if we are one brand new people on the face of the deep. Other nations have gone through this thing, but they had to do national orientation. Without national orientation, the product of policy, the financial investment into a nation will be stolen. Like you said, why won't the man steal? The judicial system will give hocus pocus. You know, in the law, the man who steals the goats, physical goat, gets punished faster than the pen thief. Where is the law for corruption? Can anybody show me what is the ABC law on corruption and the crime and the consequences? In my opinion, my passion is national retention. I believe more prisons should be built. People need to go to jail. I say if I have the National Retention Office, I will do flogging corners. Because if I can't put you in jail too quickly, we will flog you with some stripes like they used to do in Singapore. Singapore had to go on flogging. Remember they flogged an American, and the Americans were complaining that an American was flogged in Singapore, breaking their own laws. And look what you told the Americans, this is Singapore. This is not America where children can talk back, do whatever they like. And that same fellow that they were complaining about, few months down the line, back in America, he beat his father up. So a nation decided that discipline, accurate discipline, behavioral discipline, there's called behavioral discipline. All of us went through it. There's called decorum. I hear people playing their video phone without earphone. If you have video, you just playing video. You're in a crowd. And I say, excuse me, sir, I don't need to hear your video.
You're disturbing
everybody. Get
everybody.
an earphone. We assume that people will know these things. Singapore taught the people how to use a toilet, how to spit. They built high-rise building. People were taking their sheep and their goats upward.
And pigs.
He told them, no, we have created pens behind. They taught them the basic of life. And African, especially the Nigerian African, actually think she's civilized very well. No, many of us are not civilized. And if you don't have civility, you will not have productivity. If you don't have productivity, you will not have prosperity. And where there's no prosperity, the GDP will not show. Singapore is at $90,000. They have a vision by 2040 to hit $100,000 plus per capita. We are still struggling with 8,000, and we come up with hocus pocus. Oh, northern Nigeria, middle belt is the one dragging us down. Maybe all of us will be at 10,000. Why should we be at 10,000? With all the natural resources that we have across the nation, we should be championing GDP. But a nation that cannot even process her people, how can she process her product?
Okay.
So leadership, there's a lot of work to do.
Dr. Ochogo,
in 2024.
We're running out of time now. Since we have identified some of these gaps, what should we be doing to try and correct some of them in the coming year?
Thank you very much. I think that, like all my colleagues, have mentioned, one of the key areas that we need, going forward is a sanctioning mechanism. We need to strengthen our sanctioning mechanism. Everywhere you go to, there are ethics, there are ethical considerations, there are code of conducts, for every practitioners, there is a constitutions, there are laws, and all that. So what we need to do actually is to strengthen and sharpen our sanctioning mechanism. That is to say, if you are found to have fall short of the law, you pay the price for it, and then that comes to the issue of our judiciary, to be really up and doing, because all these things we are talking about, until we are able to punish offenders, we really can't go nowhere. There are good people across the country, both the private sector, the public sector, and all that, men and women of integrity, and all that. So we must strengthen our sanctioning mechanism and make people pay the price, for whatever they do, so that people don't go scot-free. And because they've gone scot-free, they become a model, for other generations that are coming, that I can do this and go free with it. Let people pay the price for their offenses. And the more people pay the prices for their offenses, I think the better it is for us. So I think that in 2024, there should be a much more sanctioning, of offenders, in different sectors.
Okay. Consequence management, that sounds like. Dr. Shobande, what are your thoughts, concluding moments? What should we be doing to bridge these gaps?
My thought is we should have a reform of the institutional framework that regulates behavior in this country. We should have a reform of the institutional framework that regulates behavior. We need to reform our educational system. In fact, for us to even do, because without strong institutions, all of these things that we are saying is just pure cheap, nothing happens. Our institutions are weak. Our institutions are weak. Let me give an example of one institution that is very close to the people, that the people will emulate the behavior of the leadership in that institution. It's still the religious sector. When we have pastors of churches sit on gold thrones, what is special about the bottom of the pastor that is not special about the church members? Why should we have somebody who has the protection of the Almighty use army to protect himself to enter in the midst of his own church members? That's another issue for another day. So what I'm saying is that there are certain behavioral parts that need to be regulated, where those who are in government obey traffic laws, where those who are in religious leadership obey traffic laws.
That's right.
The quality of teachers cannot produce anything solid at the moment. We need to give the proper remuneration for those people so that they will not compromise their values at the expense of the values that they are supposed to impute into our children.
Okay.
So all the institutional framework that we need to survive with, particularly the civil service. The civil service require a lot of transformation and reformation. And I am hoping that this current government, with their body language, is working in that direction.
Okay.
Because if we don't regulate that particular structure, it will frustrate successive governments that comes in henceforth.
Okay.
We don't have the statistics, we don't have the evidence, but let's look at the major institutions that will produce the appropriate behavior in the citizens, among the citizenry. Then let's work towards that in 2024. Thank you.
Madam.
Our national anthem is actually a curriculum. We need to transport it to become a curriculum to serve Nigeria with all my strength.
That's the pledge. The pledge.
And that's the pledge, but both national pledge and the anthem. You say, "Oh God of creation, direct our noble cause, guide our leaders right. Arise, O compatriot. Nigeria call obey, not Ibibio call obey, not Ishekiri call obey, not Nupe call obey. It is a Nigerian call. So your tribe is secondary. To serve Nigeria with all my heart, not half measure. To give it all that it takes." That is a curriculum to even start with. But the nation will never become great until we reform the people and they become civilized, because all nations went through this feudal system of bigmanism until they began to learn servant leadership.
Juliet Benitier,
Servant
President.
leadership.
No, that's another conversation altogether. Another conversation altogether. Juliet Benitier, President, CEO, Lady Ecclesia Foundation, and Director for Programs, Senior Facilitator, Institute for National Transformation. Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you,
this morning.
sir. Thank you, man.
Dr. Joseph Ochogu, DG, CEO, Institute for Peace and Conflict Resolution in the Ministry of Foreign Affairs. Thank you so much for your time, as well as Dr. Toye Shobane, who is a strategic leadership consultant. Thank you so much for your time, gentlemen.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, so we take a break now. I don't even know. Well, we'll be right back.